Alright everybody, I already did a cast of this game before, but the audio for that video was extremely bad, so I wanted to sort of like redo the casts with the proper audio settings and also add on a couple of points that people have made about this game. So for those without the background so far, this is a game between AlphaStar, which is an artificial intelligence agent developed by DeepMind Technologies, with the purpose of playing StarCraft 2 at a high level based on just training through machine learning and that sort of thing. And this is one of the first games that AlphaStar has played as Terran on the ladder against human opponents, and it's the very first game where it actually lost to a human player. That's been documented at least. So its opponent is the Diamond League Terran Butte, who is around 4100 MMR at the time of this match. And yeah, so let's see what happens in this game. So starting out, if we look at the first-person view of AlphaStar, we can see that there are no visible hotkeys in the bottom of this interface, which means that either it's a human player that's really good at playing without this, with this handicap basically, or it's a bot that can have these sort of control groups but not have them being shown because the control groups are being set through the API rather than through the game interface itself. Anyway, so that's one small thing. So if you ever play a ladder game and you see that your opponent doesn't have anything down here where they're supposed to be like control groups, then you know that it's quite likely that it may be a bot. If you look at the human opponent on the other side, you can see that he does have these hotkeys, so we know that it's very likely a human player that we're seeing here. Alright, so about these openings, so AlphaStar goes for this unorthodox wall off where he only has one depot and a barracks. Now what this does is, it's unorthodox, but it does wall off in the sense that Hellions cannot get past this small gap, as well as Marauders. So only small units such as Marines and SCVs and Widow Mines would be able to fit through this. Now, AlphaStar is going for that double gas opener, which is one of the more common openers in the high-level Terran versus Terran meta. On the other side, we have AlphaStar's opponent Butte going for that command center before taking his gases, so only taking his gases right now. And also building Marines off of his single barracks and building a bunker. Now, this type of opening is a very economic opening. However, it's really susceptible to sort of these early pressures, such as a proxy Reaper cheese, which is one of the most common cheeses in high-level Terran versus Terran. But we see that AlphaStar is not going for that sort of build, so it's totally fine, and Butte will be safe. Especially since AlphaStar is building these units but doesn't seem to be moving out immediately with them. So yeah, a little bit of supply block here by AlphaStar, but interestingly enough, AlphaStar does go for that starport right off the bat. So this is probably one of the most aggressive non-proxy Terran versus Terran openings that you can do. If you're looking at the top 4 Terran versus Terran openings, there's the Proxy Reaper, which is the most aggressive. There's the Racks into Command Center. And there's also the Racks Factory into Command Center. So those are probably the 3 most common. And then I would say the Racks Factory Starport into a Command Center is the 4th most likely. And then whatever this Butte is doing is a non-meta play. So this is not something that you would see in the top of the ladder for sure. So interestingly enough, we have AlphaStar creating the standard 3 Reaper 2 Hellion setup, but it decides not to really move out. And this is a kind of a strange thing. Like usually when you have these units, you would want to poke and try to see if the opponent has expanded, and if so, you would need to try to punish him by dealing some damage with these units. But AlphaStar deciding not to scout at all, just taking the command center, and You know, that's a fair play because moving out can be risky in a Terran versus Terran if the opponent is also going for the same units as you are. He might be able to surprise you when you're going up like a ramp like this. So I don't disagree with staying here and just playing defensively. Meanwhile, AlphaStar is going for that Cloak Banshee, but if we look at this, his opponent, Butte, has rushed out the high-sec auto-tracking upgrade on that engineering base. So actually, these turrets will have 2 additional range, I believe. 1 or 2. I don't know which. Anyway, these missile turrets that have been created by Butte, these are going to be very effective against this Banshee because of that increased range from this engineering bay. And, you know, after I casted this the first time, I received a comment from the player Butte actually saying that he copied this build from a famous Mass Raven player named Ketrock. So that's very interesting. So we're going to have this Banshee come in from AlphaStar, and it's going to see that there are a couple missile turrets here, and immediately AlphaStar notices that there are missile turrets and runs away here. So no harm done, only taking a single shot from the missile turret. And AlphaStar should recognize that it's actually impossible for his Banshee to fly past this missile turret. There's no space here, but for some reason, AlphaStar decides, oh, I'm still going to try, and just loses the Banshee straight up. So this is a really good start from Butte because just like getting that kill ensures that, you know, he's not going to fall behind from this opener. And as you can see, it is an interesting opener. So he does open with a Planetary Fortress straight off the bat in his natural, and then in the background he's going up to 2 starports and producing Ravens straight up while going for building armor and that aforementioned high-sec auto-tracking upgrade. So now AlphaStar has poked and has seen that this is a Planetary Fortress, so this is the part of the game where if you're the Terran and you've scouted this, you need to adjust your game plan knowing that your opponent is not going to have a lot of mineral income due to this Planetary Fortress. So a human player, when analyzing this, would probably guess that the opponent is going for a mech style build. Most likely Mass Ravens, because Ravens are a unit that mostly cost gas, so you don't really need a lot of minerals to produce them, so you can afford to have this Planetary Fortress in your natural because you don't need as many minerals for this build. So if we look at what AlphaStar is doing in response, AlphaStar is going for that 3rd command center on location, which is the correct play because building the command center on location allows you to get it set up faster than if you were to build it up here in your main base. And another adjustment that AlphaStar is doing, which this is an adjustment because we've seen games now from this Terran AlphaStar where it does not go for this 2nd starport. AlphaStar does do a good job of being active with these units and seeing that there's a 3rd base going down for his opponent, so that's good for him. But on the other hand, just continuing to produce Marines, even though it's evident that AlphaStar has decided on that mech transition. So that's a curious play because you can see that AlphaStar has gathered up plenty of Marines here. We do see that a Raven has actually been sacrificed here to try to get some damage on the SB line. Now, AlphaStar is trying to make plays here with his fleet of like this Banshee and a couple Ravens, but it should know that there are these 3 turrets, so it's going to be pretty much impossible to get into the main base with anything that flies. So it's curious that after seeing this turret placement by his opponent, that AlphaStar still decides, oh, I think going Banshees would be the best play here. So that's one interesting thing. Another thing here is we see that AlphaStar has continued to make Marines and is still producing Marines, even though it has clearly decided to play mech, with evidence by this +1 vehicle upgrade and nothing on the engineering base side. However, AlphaStar has continued to make Marines, and AlphaStar has 19 Marines on the field as well as 7 tanks. Now, for some reason, all the AlphaStar games we've seen on this map, it decides, oh, I'm going to take this position with my siege tanks and kind of just like camp here. But given the way AlphaStar's opponent is playing, I would say that this is one of the biggest blunders that AlphaStar has done in this game. So basically right now, AlphaStar has all the pieces that it needs to end the game or at least severely cripple its opponent. However, it's deciding to just stay here this entire time while allowing its opponent to take base number 4 and base number 5 at the same time and morph in 2 planetary fortresses at these locations. Now, I'm not sure if AlphaStar recognizes that it's a masked Raven. Oh, it probably does because it looks like some of its units got picked off here. So I'd say AlphaStar should know that it is facing masked Ravens right now, and it's deciding that the best strategy would be to produce Banshees and non-upgraded Marines while sitting back over here. So I think this is a huge flaw in its strategic reaction in this game. And as you can see, by getting these bases up, Butte is able to pad his gas income really quickly, and that will allow him to continue to produce these Ravens at a higher rate and eventually get to that critical mass of Ravens that you need. So once he gets to around like 30 Ravens, it's going to be really tough for AlphaStar to combat that without potentially his own Ravens. So yeah, so if AlphaStar were to move out with this army, he would have been able to siege up here, and at least have those tanks shell down these command centers, and that would have been a much better position to be in compared to now, where, like, if you look at the supply, AlphaStar does have a lot more supply, but it's in a lot of like weak units, such as these 29 Marines. Like these 29 Marines without any upgrades, without stim, combat shields, they're not going to be effective. They're not going to be able to chase these Ravens down. It just won't give AlphaStar the firepower that it needs to fight this. And as you can see, AlphaStar, for some reason, just keeps trying to harass this portion of the map with these missile turrets. And as you can see, these missile turrets have already gotten 3 kills on this fleet of air units, and it's just not really accomplishing anything. And AlphaStar just like stubbornly tries to keep going in here and doing damage, but it's just not very effective, as you can see. So still, AlphaStar has not moved out, and it is approaching that max supply. Now, one of the problems in TVT that like a lot of players have trouble with is when you're max, like how are you going to get your army composition to an army that can like fight the other person's maxed army? Like if you're just like producing whatever and then you end up with like some ragtag composition like what AlphaStar has here with like 5 Banshees, 17 tanks, and 33 unupgraded Marines, like how are you going to transition that into something that can actually help you win a fight? So it doesn't seem like AlphaStar has an answer. AlphaStar just kind of just made whatever units that it felt were strong, and it doesn't seem like it was a response to this Raven comp. It was just kind of like, I have some starports, I'm just gonna like spend my money on whatever. And yeah, like as you can see, he can't really do anything to these Ravens. Like the Marines, they don't have stim, they don't have anything that can chase down these Ravens. So Butte is pretty much safe to like fly in with the Ravens and try to deal damage. So here's the first kind of engagement from AlphaStar, aggression from AlphaStar 12 minutes into the game, and just kind of like loses all the Marines to the planetary fortress. And these tanks having been separated from the Marines, they're not going to be able to hold off these Ravens. Like they're pretty much helpless because they can't shoot up. So it's just like hardly any anti-air from AlphaStar here. Just made him lose this fight decisively. And if we look at the units lost tab, it's just very severe, and AlphaStar has lost pretty much all of the Banshees that it's made without doing any damage at all. It's going to lose the rest of these siege tanks, so it's looking pretty dire. But AlphaStar does have very good economy with 79 workers, a lot of command centers coming up. So if AlphaStar is able to produce something that can fight that mass Raven flock, it still has the potential to win the game. But right now it's decided, okay, I'm going to make some mass a lot of Vikings. And I think Butte recognizes that they're Vikings, or he has some idea, because later on he goes into this upgraded Widowmine style. And yeah, just like at this point, AlphaStar can't really pick off the Ravens easily. You can just like come in with these auto turrets and just fly away against these Vikings. Might pick off a couple, but in the end, like these Widowmines are just too good for zoning out those Vikings, because one hit from the Widowmine and it's already paid for itself basically, because of all the expensive units that AlphaStar has produced here. So yeah. Now, something that we mentioned already is that AlphaStar does not seem to have a good grasp on building placement, it seems. So if you look here, any human that's kind of concentrating wouldn't really decide to place their buildings in this fashion, because we know that, see, if you look at this starport and this tech lab, this is already too small of a gap for a siege tank to fit in. So usually, after a human has played Terran for a couple games, he'll realize that, you know, I've got to have my buildings separated by a certain amount so that tanks won't get stuck like this. In the case when that happens, like when you see a human have this problem, it's usually a mistake because they're like rushing, they're trying to build their stuff as fast as possible, but there's really no excuse for a bot to do this, I would think, because, you know, a bot doesn't make mistakes really, or it shouldn't make mistakes. Like everything should be like with a purpose, or that's what you would think. But, you know, AlphaStar has made plenty of mistakes in this game. Like, there have been micro mistakes with the Banshees for sure. Like, not knowing when to run away from the missile turret. And decision-making mistakes as well, with continuing to produce these Marines that are not helpful at all, and just going for, like, a weak composition, and even though it knows what the opponent is doing. So right now, it's still, like, AlphaStar is up in supply, but one thing that it's doing incorrectly, I would say, is it's going into very many SCVs, like 89 SCVs right now. And I don't even know where most of these SCVs are, actually. But yeah, it's definitely a lot of SCVs, and this means that even though his army supply is very high, his army value is not as high as it could have been. If he only had, like, say, 50 SCVs, he could have made a few more army units, which would have helped him win some fights, potentially. But still, like, this Raven flock, it doesn't seem like AlphaStar has an answer for that. And these tanks, you'll see that they're going to be stuck here for the entire game. And AlphaStar is definitely aware that this is happening, because, look, see, AlphaStar has already positioned a starport here, trapping these tanks even further. So clearly knows that they're here, but it doesn't seem to care, or doesn't seem to know how to solve this problem. So my hypothesis with this building placement issue is that building placement is actually a very difficult problem. Oh, wait. I did not expect that. So AlphaStar actually seemed to try to get those tanks out by killing a tech lab of its own. So we've established that we've now established that AlphaStar does know how to kill its own buildings, but apparently it just, like, made a reactor here, so anything that it did that was helpful there. Actually, let's go back and see what happened there. That's very interesting. So right now the tanks are extremely stuck. They're extremely stuck, and then AlphaStar is like, alright, I need to... Oh, wow. And then they're still stuck. Alright. And then he tries to do that with the other factory. Is he gonna, like... Okay, I think he's just confused, doesn't know what to do here. Like, if you're watching this play, and you still think it might not be a bot, well, like, what is this? Oh my goodness. It's a disaster. Like, it doesn't really... It has no idea what it's doing. And, oh, here's the Viking suicide here, so just, like, flying its units everywhere, and then After this point, it's pretty much game. Like, the blue player has taken too much of the map. It's pretty much unbreakable, all these positions with the tech that AlphaStar has. You're not going to be able to break these with Banshees. You pretty much need just like even Bio. If he were to transition to Bio here, he doesn't have really the upgrades or the time to do so. So like the game is pretty much over here. But very interested in, like, I didn't catch this in the previous game, but these 5 tanks, like, it seems that AlphaStar did try to do something to get them out, but it just wasn't effective, and it wasn't able to concentrate enough to try to, like, get it. So if we view AlphaStar's first-person point of view, right? So how many times is AlphaStar going to go back to his base and see that there are those tanks there, right? So at this point we know that the game is over. Like, the rest of the game is basically just a struggle with AlphaStar trying to combat. Okay, so you saw back there. So okay, if we replay this. So right there. Okay, right. Right there, AlphaStar is looking straight at this base and sees that there are 5 tanks siege here, right? And if we keep going, there's it again, seeing it again, a 3rd time, right? 4th time, a 5th time, 6th time. So, like, it's looking at this, I would say, like, pretty much like at least once a minute, but this entire game it's not able to find a solution on getting these tanks out of there. So that's just, like, when you look at that, you just think that it's a bot. Like, there's no way a human player would just look at that and be like, wow. Especially since we've shown that the bot knows how to sacrifice its own tech labs. Like, it's not as if the bot's gonna say, it's saying, oh, I'm never going to kill my own buildings, that's bad. It's done that already this game, but it's not able to do it in a way that finds the solution to the problem. So that's very interesting. So yeah, we're gonna fast forward the rest of the game. There's not much to see here because, you know, it's been established that AlphaStar doesn't really have a strategy to combat the way his opponent is playing. So, but yeah, just these tanks, I don't know. Alright, so another thing about these control groups from AlphaStar is that if you look at the minimap right now, you can see that these command centers are flashing every few seconds, and you can see that the buildings are flashing every few seconds. And that's due to the AlphaStar actually having these control groups, but they're just not visible through replay because these selections are made through the API. So the game can recognize those selections, but the replay file just doesn't have them for some reason. But something you can see is that there's a metric called APM, and then there's also one called EPM. And you can see that for AlphaStar, the APM is 204 with the EPM of 187. So that's a difference of roughly 15. And basically the difference between the APM and the EPM is that any action where you are selecting a control group is counted towards your APM but not towards the EPM. So that means that somebody with a very high APM but a much lower EPM is that way because they are pressing their control groups many times per minute. For like top players, they might even be pressing it around 200 times per minute. So you'll see like 400 APM versus 200 EPM. And basically that's the only way for your APM to rise while the EPM does not rise. So the only way that you can have that non-EPM APM is through the control groups. So based on that information, we know that AlphaStar is pressing its control groups roughly 15 to 17 times per minute here. So that basically means no spam. So human players would spam so like they're selecting their command centers and their barracks, but sometimes they're not building anything, right? But AlphaStar selects the buildings only when it wants to build, and then otherwise it's not going to have any useless selections, which is probably the main reason why its APM is only a little bit higher than its EPM. So some people may say that, oh, it's because of its like clicks on the minimap or like clicks on the map. However, I've tested that, and clicks on the map, even if you click the same spot multiple times, it still counts all towards your EPM. So it's all control group spam, which is something that AlphaStar does not do a lot of, that humans do. So that's basically the main difference in how it plays versus a human in terms of like mechanics wise. Oh, but it probably doesn't click multiple times as well, but you just won't see it. But anyway, yeah, so it's going for some last-ditch Widowmine efforts. So it does, like, interestingly enough, it does change its composition after it loses a fight. But, you know, it's still not effective. Like, as you can see here, there's a lot more Banshees in this composition than its previous attempt. But, like, you would argue that this is even worse than what it was trying before. Like, how are Widowmines going to do anything against Ravens when they can just, like, cast these turrets to just, like, kill them, right? So, yeah, overall, I would say that just judging by the number of games I've seen of the 3 races of AlphaStars, the Terran AlphaStar is definitely like the weakest. And unless they update it with some various improvements, it's most likely that the Terran AlphaStar is going to end up the lowest rated out of the 3 when it's all said and done, at least for this session. And it already is lacking. We can see that as of today, each of them have played 60 games, with the Terran AlphaStar at 5500 MMR and the other 2 at 5700. So we can already see it's kind of already lacking a little bit. And I think it's mostly because of that building placement, but also one of the most important things of Terran is your unit positioning. So like if you're setting up a good siege line, and moving your chess pieces that way. And it seems like that's a problem that AlphaStar has not been able to solve very well. So yeah, it's kind of disappointing. I was expecting like a lot stronger play from a Terran AlphaStar, just knowing like what the skill ceiling of Terran is in general, but just based on the way it's been trained, it just hasn't gotten there yet. So let me know if you have any comments on the Terran AlphaStar, what you think it could do better, and all that stuff. And maybe I'll upload something else later. We'll see. Thanks.